I was sitting on the outskirts of a smoker's pole when I first heard about reality shifting. It was right after school started again for the semester. The bar was packed with students who had come back to campus to cross-examine each other on who had the best summer vacations and worst lineup of fall classes. It didn't seem like we should be going back to school. The night was too hot and full of energy, feeling more like the beginning of summer than the end. I felt that pull that I needed a minute away from the crowd, like always. I slipped past the friends I had come out with to the perch against the brick alley between the bar and the pizza place, suspended in clouds that smell like tobacco and candy. I pull out my phone and turn my face up to the moon, letting the sweat cool on my skin. I listened to the sounds of light conversation, the familiar clicking ritual of lighters and dramatically exhaled breath. I've always loved spending time with smokers because they live their lives in snapshots, not in big pictures. I hate the smell and taste of it. Nicotine, pot, all of it. I hate the feeling of something other than air in my lungs. But I love the undeniable fuck you freedom of it. It's worth the secondhand smoke to have a break from the constant barrage of thinking about what comes next. To me, that forward-thinking pressure has always felt like an ice pack on my forehead. Heavy and soothing at first, and then a slow, irritating drip that I want to shut back into the freezer. That drip gets more pronounced as the days go on and on, always seeming to come back to the inevitable truth that we're playing a game like we're not going to die, now or later, and quite possibly violently, too early and without any control. Smokers get it. They welcome death in little drips and drags and do it in public, with friends, and more often than not, a smile. My mom was like that. A lipstick-stained American Spirit cigarette was her middle finger to a world she thought took itself too seriously. She was into puzzles, conspiracy theories, all things New Age. She did tarot card readings on weekends and told me it was in our genes to hear the whispers of the universe, which meant anything from a remarkable bird to unusual burnt patterns in toast. She loved to challenge anything conventional. She loved to argue, and she loved to laugh. She adored horror movies and laughed the hardest when I tried to watch them with her, wincing and looking at the screen from between my fingers. But her snapshots ran out last summer. Last spring, her laughter was replaced by a cough. And the cough turned into a diagnosis, and the diagnosis into a gravestone. Lung cancer, the doctor said, as if those words could encapsulate the life force that was my mother. As if those words were somehow a justifiable explanation for watching her slowly drown in her own blood. It's shockingly lonely to be an orphan, technically an adult, but feeling anything but, with no other family to speak of. My mom had been a free spirit to the extreme, which I loved her for, but wasn't everyone's cup of tea. There hadn't been a funeral, just me, her ashes, and a quiet lake. I've been told it gets easier, but it hasn't yet. Being around smokers reminds me of her, but I get clocked right away as someone who doesn't belong. I always have to fight against coughing, and the best I can do is fiddle with whatever object is closest instead of elegantly drawing out a cigarette from a pack or whipping out a vape that looks like it costs more than a phone. Usually, they don't notice me, but if they do, they always know I'm not entirely on their level, banding together to sacrifice a little life for a bit of fun. Bullshit. The word was spoken with such disgust that it made me look up from my phone. I swear it's real, but you don't have to believe me. A woman with a pink wolf cut raised her hands up defensively, a joint smoldering loosely between her fingers. I don't, because it's bullshit. You would literally do anything to get out of doing this essay. Her companion, about a half-foot taller in heeled boots, took a hit from their vape and raised their eyebrows pointedly. I literally already finished the essay. Almost. And shifting actually helped me. My ears perked up at that. I needed inspiration to get me through the first few weeks back on campus. The first one since my mother died. How? Their voice was more of a criticism than an actual question, but the pink-haired woman answered anyway. Well, I've been training all summer. She pulled out her phone and thumbed through it, pulling up something I couldn't catch from my vantage point and displaying it with a flourish. Her companion steadied it in front of her face, peered down in the low light, and tightly winced when they saw whatever it was. Can you not say that like it's a sport? Watching TikTok videos isn't training. Why are you being so negative? And how would you know? Without a warning, the woman jerked her head towards me, sporting a sharp glare I hadn't realized I earned. Without thinking, I had been staring at them while they spoke, and I felt the blood rush to my cheeks in a blush I hoped wasn't too visible in the darkness. She raised her eyebrows, thrusting out her hand that held the joint. It was an accusation more than it was an offer. I licked my lips, which felt papery, and put my phone in my pocket, almost dropping it in my rush to reassure them I wasn't doing anything suspicious. I rubbed my sweaty palms in my jeans, keeping my hands busy. I tried again to find the words and then gave up, drowning in awkwardness. I'm good, I settled on weakly, feeling anything but. I slid off my perch and tried to make myself as small as possible as I slowly fled. It was not the first misalignment with being ousted from a place I didn't quite belong, and probably not the last. It was an involuntary habit of mine. When I got back to the bar, I pretended it had never happened, drinking away the blush on my face and mentally petitioning whatever higher power was listening that I wouldn't run into the two people I had been listening in on. I didn't, thankfully. But the subject had intrigued me, the woman's adamant certainty and her companion's utter disdain. It drifted in and out of the forefront of my conscience between classes and planning out calendars of tests and quizzes. The thought lingered in the back of my mind over the following weeks, coupled with the sting of embarrassment that I worried at like a sore tooth. The stars aligned on Halloween. I was awake way later than I should have been, debating if I should try to sleep at all. I had caught myself spending an entire hour switching between streaming services and browsing video games, looking for another distraction that I couldn't quite settle on. I had declined every offer to go out and celebrate. I kept thinking about how much I missed my mom on her favorite holiday, pulled toward a void I couldn't fill with a text or a call to her like I used to. It was then that the thought flickered and stuck in place for the first time. Shifting is what the woman with the pink hair had called it. I unlocked my phone, pulled open a few social media platforms, and tried a few combinations to figure out what she had been talking about. It took 15 minutes or so to find the meat of it. Reality shifting was somehow so popular that there were 100,000 people on the subreddit, but still no Wikipedia article. The general idea was that you could transform your reality through focus and visualization into a book, a TV show, or just about anything you wanted. I stayed up until light leaked through my window, flipping through first-hand accounts of shifting and scripts, which were essential world-building maps of where you wanted to go. I started taking notes on it like I should have done for the paper I was supposed to be writing. I had this weird, lightheaded, giddy feeling throughout the next day, not just from sleep deprivation. The concept of shifting realities appealed to me in a way that nothing ever had before. It was fascinating to me. I zoned out in class, flipping through video after video, script after script, consuming everything I could about it. The content was open and inquisitive, a community built on safe spaces where folks asked questions and gave each other tips. It was a strange, comforting thought, to dive into a reality where the rules could be rewritten. But after walking through dozens of open doors of friendly forums, I found one that was effectively closed. It was a script that I could find references to, but there was no full copy available online, and no one seemed to know who to ask. But the word was hashtagged in a few places, and a few bottom-of-the-barrel searches yielded some results. Epey. In theory, Epey was a script, but the accounts I could find about it were odd and piecemeal compared to the other content, lost in a bunch of advertisements for some kind of diabetes medication. The reality-shifting experiences I had found up until that point were bright, technicolor, lush sort of things, like a chance to tour your favorite magical world or medical drama soap opera. Epey was different. It was described as, for the lack of a better way of putting it, an empty series of hallways with clay figurines scattered throughout. The clay objects were always white or red, and always in different places. The hallways were completely empty. Just a blank white series of angular architecture that seemed somewhere between an art gallery and perfectly generic storerooms, like an abandoned mall. It was like someone had ripped apart the screenplay for a thriller and left it adrift on the internet. And of all of the different options at my fingertips, every universe I could go to, this is the one that called to me. I wasn't alone. There were comments all over the place, trying to find out more, to find even just a piece of the original script. Because no one, not a single person, had a full explanation of what happened there. I started to interact more actively with this subgroup. My evening was filled with exchanging DMs, each a puzzle piece forming a more bizarre image of the Epey mystery. People had shifted and come back, each offering only snippets. I found the white apple. I touched the red sewing box. I gazed through the white magnifying glass. I held the red penny in my palm. The deeper I got into the Epey discussions, the less alone I felt. It was weirdly comforting, like finding a hidden room in a house you've lived in your whole life. You can't believe you missed it before, but now that you found it, it becomes the most interesting thing about it. That's what Epey was for me. A newly discovered space that felt more like home than anywhere else. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I belonged. And my mom would have loved it. The strange, eerie mystery of it. I imagined her sitting next to me, long fingernails pointing at things on the screen that caught her eye, tapping my shoulder like she used to when she got excited about something. For the first time, I got what made my mom so intrigued about stuff like this. I wanted to know. I wanted to see those white and red objects for myself. I wanted to wander those empty hallways. I didn't just want to read about it or hear secondhand stories. I wanted to experience it, to be part of this strange, secret club that had been captivated by the same inexplicable pull. So, I wrote myself a script. I had imagined it so many times already, and the basics of the world were simple enough that it was easy to write. I left the clay objects open-ended and the walls blank. I followed each of the directions exactly, sitting upright against the pillows on my bed with my eyes closed, taking deep breaths to relax. I said the affirmations. I imagined myself sitting on a train on my way there, trying to get my heartbeat to match the soft rhythm of it. For the first 100 times I tried, that train was as far as I got. Obsession has a funny way of sneaking up on you. 1 minute, you're a regular college kid with a quirky hobby. The next, you're the hermit down the hall. I was stuck in my room, a self-made prison, chasing after something that I felt like it was always just out of reach. I read forum after forum, piecing together scraps of information like I was trying to solve a crime. My computer was a graveyard of dead ends. I skipped class, and then I skipped meals. My roommate stopped knocking on the door to invite me out. Frustration boiled over. This should have been easy. No rules, no guidelines, just get there. But I couldn't. The floor felt like a slab of concrete under me. My eyes wouldn't close. They were glued to the wall. Every breath I took was tinged with anger. My positive affirmations twisted into self-loathing. My train was a bottomless pit to nowhere. I cursed at myself. My words rushed and tumbled over each other in an almost ritualistic fervor. Anger and frustration bubbled from some dark corner of my mind, fueling me for what I had to do next. Then, hesitating only briefly, I grabbed a handful of pushpins from the posters on my wall, lining them up before I stabbed them into my hand. And that, it turned out, is how you get to Epey. The pain was bone deep, shocking, and a gateway. It was instantaneous. A blink and the world I knew was replaced by the endless nothing of Epey. It was viscerally satisfying in a way I had never felt before. The longer I walked, the more it seemed to awaken, responding to my presence. I embraced the feeling of being lost. With each step, the halls seemed to elongate, the perspective warping subtly, angles softly skewing until I wasn't sure I was moving forward or simply standing still as the world stretched away from me. The red of the walls was visceral, as if the paint itself pulsed with life, while the white of the floor tiles was the stark white of bones picked clean. The air was still, buzzing with a latent potential, as if the space was holding its breath, waiting for something to occur. I called out a soft, "Hello," but my voice seemed to be swallowed immediately by the space, as if it was eager to have it. And while it still felt silly at first, I got comfortable with speaking to the maze as if it were an old friend, commenting on the quirks of its design like I used to tease my friends. I don't know how many times I went there. Each step was a success. Each new long empty stretch was my favorite adventure. The prizes all felt so real in my hands, cool and smooth, before they broke apart like fallen sand sculptures. I walked the bare hallways of Epey. For hours, I stared at nothing. And my prize, on a jagged pedestal that erupted from the tiled floor like a bloody thorn through ice, was a delicate white feather that smelled like flowers when it crumbled away into dust. I put razor blades under my nails in the quiet of my room, and at the end of the maze, a red fountain pen leaked wetly onto my fingers before the ink turned into a chalky powder that caught in the air, flowing around my face like pollen, and then disappearing entirely. On the bare wooden floor of my bedroom, I poured out uncooked rice, kneeling and performing the shifting routine that had become my ritual. Then, I rounded the red corners of Epey and found a small strawberry on the ground, cast all in white, that melted like ash on my tongue and tasted like metal. Again and again and again, I found myself compelled to return, each journey requiring a more severe penance, each object at the end pulling me deeper into an obsession I could neither understand nor control. But there was also a growing sense of something else, something that was both sad and a relief. I no longer felt my mother's presence shadowing me. There was no one to share in my triumphs, no one to witness my journey. It was just me in the red and white, in the closed doors, in the ever-extending corridor. And that was enough. In the reality I had started to think of as a boring pit stop until I returned to Epey, my reflection in the mirror looked gaunt, and my grades on the assignments that I did manage to turn in started to plummet. My roommates stopped knocking. Their laughter and conversation from the living room grew quieter, or maybe I stopped hearing them. Even the professors that I had gotten along with stopped asking if everything was okay, their eyes glossing over me during lectures as if I had become invisible. Sometimes, begrudgingly, I considered the implications of what I was doing. Did everyone need to torture themselves like I did? If so, why didn't they say anything in the forums? Were they ashamed to talk about it? Like me? But I couldn't stop. Each shift promised a deeper understanding, something just beyond the next corner. I started noticing a pattern. The deeper you went into Epey, the more convoluted the way back. The walls would fall apart and reassemble themselves. The longer you were there, the more it changed, and the more it grew. Until the last time I went down the last hallway, and the creature was there. His eyes froze me in place, one a milky white, clouded like a corpse's, the other a piercing blood red that seemed to pulse with every beat of my heart. They were suspended in a bare skull, topped by twisted horns and scraped the top of the ceiling. White smoke dribbled out of his mouth and down his chin like it was something liquid, dripping down to the tiled floor. It seemed as if he was made of the walls, and the walls were made of him. The room seemed large enough to contain him and his rotting hoofed body that looked like an eviscerated moose on its hind legs. He wrapped his clawed hands around mine, placing something in them I couldn't see, lost in his stare. My final prize. Who made you? I thought, horrified to my core. And through smiling pointed white teeth, stained with red blood, he replied, "You." My own eyes snapped open, and the gaping walls of Epey were replaced by the more simple geometry of my bedroom walls. It was an abrupt, jolting emergence, like being thrown out of a speeding car. I lay there for what felt like hours, my chest heaving as if I had run miles, though I hadn't moved an inch. My body was anchored again to the floor, to a room, to the stifling ordinariness of the reality I had started with. From that day on, my strange addiction to reality shifting broke. The urge to leave and explore Epey no longer buzzed under my skin. Instead, when I thought about it, I felt a dread that went bone deep. Now, in theory, I'm back in this world of textbooks, of Friday day drinking, of last-minute cramming sessions before finals, of making up for lost meals and lost points towards my GPA. I'm back to missing my mother more than ever, without the twisting labyrinth of Epey to distract me. But I can't shake this feeling that I only have one foot back here and the other is stuck back in the other reality. I feel like I'm being pulled into, and I feel like I'm being watched. When I'm in a grocery store, walking down an empty aisle, I can't help but think it could go on forever, just like those corridors. I swear I can see it, stretching out in front of me like a tunnel with no end, before I blink it away and I'm back in the fluorescent light. I'll be washing dishes, looking at the soap suds as they spiral down the drain, and there it is, that prickling sensation at the back of my neck, and suddenly, it's all just dust in my hands. I sip my coffee in the morning, and it tastes like dead flowers and ash. Or scrolling through my phone at night, a stupid pop-up with a stark white text against a red background, and the feeling returns, crawling up my spine, the letters fading to powder in front of me before I force my eyes to see them again. In the mirror, I see my eyes reflected back at me, red with exhaustion. But for a split second, I swear they're not mine. They're too knowing, too empty, too wide and too red. I see Epey in every empty classroom, the alleyways on the walk home, my own bedroom before I turn on the light. I checked the old forms the other day. I don't know what I expected. Maybe other people were still walking around Epey, enjoying the solitude and looking for answers to their own mysteries. I thought I'd find comfort in numbers, in knowing that I wasn't the only one haunted by the red and white pattern. But there was no relief, just a tightening knot of dread in my stomach as I scrolled through posts and comments. I'm not alone, but that doesn't make it better. It makes it worse. Because whatever's happening, it's escalating. One person posted about seeing eyes in the reflection of their TV screen, white and red, only visible if you looked at him from the corner of his eye. Another person recounted how the white curtains of the living room were suddenly sliced, long red streaks appearing as though an invisible claw had torn through the fabric, but that only half of their family could see the marks. Another said all she did was read about it. She hadn't been able to shift fully, struggling like I once had. But she had started sleepwalking anyway, always waking with her face pressed painfully hard against the dead-end hallway in her own house. The most recent content, aside from those accounts, was a series of furious panic demands that the mods delete anything and everything about Epey, like it was some kind of contagion. I can't escape the feeling that those empty hallways were never really empty. Maybe we just couldn't see what was watching us. I hear the creature's voice sometimes, echoing in the quieter moments. It's not words I can describe easily, more like a distorted frequency than human speech. I feel the beating burning cold of the unseen things he left in my hands, and the questions burnt into my brain like a brand. Did I ever really leave Epey? Or did it just get more clever at making the maze? And if I did, and I brought it back with me, how long? Until this world starts to crumble away too.